Guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm sure people will trickle in. You're going to sit. You're sitting. Everybody can hear me okay? Good. Okay. I'm Stephanie Watkins. Our son Noah is over here in the Herbie the Love Bug shirt, and his sister Hannah just did the sibling presentation, and that is his cousin Courtney. She is his oldest cousin by 5 months, I think. And she is now a genetics counselor. So our daughter works as a nurse with folks with developmental disabilities. So it's kind of becoming a family thing. This is my husband, Todd. We both work in the state of Maryland as what's called support brokers. So we work with folks that have received a home and community-based service waiver through Medicaid. And then in our state, in most states, you have an option to go with traditional services or what's called self-directed services. So we support folks in the self-directed model. We help them with hiring staff, managing their budgets, just kind of all the background stuff that it takes to manage their lives. We are kind of more like the back end on that. Noah is in traditional services. He lives in a group home. I'm going to go into more of that later, but wanted to start just a little bit about our process of his diagnosis. Noah was diagnosed when he was little with just developmental delay, right? Kind of in our heads thought, he's going to catch up. He's just delayed, right? Had the beautiful smile, very engaging. We thought, he's fine. Then as things progressed, he just wasn't meeting any milestones, wasn't communicating, wasn't walking, kind of the bigger things. And we had diagnoses of mostly neurological. That was probably a one-time infection in utero or some kind of happening in utero that caused neurological problems. But we had a geneticist tell us, I think it's genetic and someday they're going to find it. Go down the road, at age 4, he's diagnosed with a mitochondrial disease, which we still believe he has. We think it might somehow be connected. A lot of research, maybe someday we'll find out. So then he starts having significant behaviors as a teenager. We had a wonderful psychiatrist at Johns Hopkins who was also very educated in autism, and she said, there's so much happening with genetics, I think you should go back and get more genetics testing. So this was at like age 16, 17, maybe in that range. So he's finally diagnosed, I think we finally did it after his behaviors got so out of control and we were kind of desperate for answers. At age 19, we received the SATB2 diagnosis. And we've kind of over the years said, was it a good thing or bad thing that we went the first 19 years without knowing, right? Like I think there's a lot of greatness of coming together and learning from one another, but also we had no labels, we had no limitations on anything, right? I think sometimes when you do get that diagnosis, you look at others and then they'll never talk, now, 8 years later, I guess, we're starting to see that our folks with SATB2 have such a range, right? Like we've got, we have kids that are more severely impacted, and then we've got kids that are talking and reading and communicating, and so I think we are starting, to have more hope, right, with this diagnosis, that we're not in this tight box, right? It's got a lot of options. So it's a little bit about our family, Noah's history. You want to start us off?
Yes. So now on to our talk about adulting. And so I want to start with talking a little bit about what your dreams are for kids. And so many of the things that I think apply to this dream big notion for our SAS kids apply to all of our kids, right? And I think many of the things that's true of. And so how do we prepare our children in general for adulthood? What do we want to do? Our first point there says teach them age and ability appropriate skills. I heard a talk once by Dr. James Dobson, who used to run Focus on the Family, and it's something I heard probably, I don't know, I bet it's been 30 years ago now, and it's always stuck with me. And he said, from the moment your kids are born, this applies to all kids, from the moment your kids are born, start turning over to them age-appropriate responsibilities so that by the time they are 18, right, they can do all the things they need to do as an adult. And I thought, what a great parenting strategy, right? We used to be youth pastors, and we had a family that didn't give their kids any responsibility at all. until they turned 18, and then they said, okay, now you're off to college and on your own, and the kids didn't know how to do anything. And so it really has impacted our lives like that. And we've tried to do the same thing with Noah, but we find that, Stephanie mentioned he lives in a group home now, they give him much more responsibility than we ever did. And so we now learn from them because we did things for him that he could have done for himself. And we learned that when we saw other people caring for him and they taught us lessons. Like still, he'll sometimes come to our house and we'll be, I'll take a spoon and give him a spoonful of stuff. And his staff says, he can do that. And I say, and I thank them for the reminder. So teach them to do things all the way along that are age appropriate, and I put in there ability appropriate. Help them to become independent. Here's what I said, don't do for them what they can do for themselves. Now, some of our folks know Noah's never going to be able to do all of the things he needs to do for himself, but he can do a lot of things, right? When he moved to the group home, he started to dress himself. We always dressed him, right, when he lived with us. Some of his personal care things, like in the shower or whatever, and we did all that for him, and we learned he can do many of those things. So I think that's a natural limitation that we feel a responsibility to do so many of these things for our SAS kids, and we need to check ourselves periodically. And strangers can help with that. Other people can come in and check us on that. But offer support when they need it. And this is true of all of our kids, once again, right? Offer it when they need it. Let them know you're there always, but that you want them to learn how to do things on their own. We have this talk. We have kids now that are, Noah's 27, 26, 24, and 22, and we have this talk about all of them all of the time, right? And it's usually Stephanie wanting to do something for them, and I say, no, they need to know, they need to do that for themselves, right? That's often, but sometimes it's opposite of that. And so we want to help our kids develop to be all that they can be, but be there when they need us, okay? And then help them explore what their strengths are. What do they like to do? Noah now lives in a group home that's about an hour away from where his therapeutic riding center is. He's done therapeutic horseback riding since he was 2 years old. He loves it. I think he likes the horse part, but I think he loves the people at the therapeutic riding place even better. And so we make arrangements when, one day a week we drive down the hour to go get him, to bring him to therapeutic riding because it is such an interest of his and he loves it so much. And so help them explore those kind of interests. We want our kids to grow up and be happy and healthy adults. I don't know many people in life that get as much joy out of simple things as Noah, right? He is a happy guy. Did I suddenly lose him? No. He is a happy guy, and most of the time, right? 98% of the time. When he's unhappy, that's not a good thing. But he's normally happy, and that's what we want for him. And so we talk about that in terms of his setting. Should he live with us? Should he live in his own apartment somewhere? Should he continue to live in the group home? And one of the reasons why he stays there is because he's got a best friend there. And we think that's the best situation for him right now. Find friends and a spouse to share their lives with. That's what we want for all of our kids, right? And that's what we want for Noah. And so how do we figure out how to do that? And we'll go into some case studies here to explore that question a little bit more. And then a sense of community. What is it? What do our daughter was just sharing in the last session? We're so happy that she lives about an hour from us the other direction, and she has gone and built this tremendous community. She's really involved in her church and the young adult group there, and she has this wonderful group of friends, and we couldn't be more thrilled about that. That's what we want for our kids. That's what we want for Noah. That's what he has right now in the group home where he lives. And so we are, we continue to try to foster that. And then what's their purpose and meaning? And many of us struggle with that question well into our adulthood, right? What's our contribution? What's our meaning in life? And sometimes I think that having a child or a sibling with SAS helps us to define that, right? Helps us to define what that purpose and what that role is. And so we want to do that same thing for Noah and for all of our kids with SAS, to find what is it, how can they contribute, and what are ways that we can foster that contribution for them.
So for us, Noah leaving school, that idea of him graduating, and for him it was at 21, was so overwhelming and daunting for me. And he is the oldest of our four. So I hadn't been through the process. Well, he waited till he was 21. So I had been through the process then with our daughter, and then Noah graduated, I want to say the same year as our third son. But now looking back, you kind of see looking back what you didn't see. But looking back, I realized that like so much of that process was really the same, right? You prep them, right? You prepare them to find out what their talents, their interests are, where they want to go in their future. And you start to dream, like you help your typical developing kids dream in their head. What do you want out of life? Like let's take it little steps at a time. So we're going to start by prepping for if it's college or trade school or work or whatever it is, and you make those tiny little steps. I think for those of you like not at the graduation point yet, just do the same thing. Break it down into small steps and start to prepare. And then when I meet with families that I support, one of the things, especially when I used to work with younger families, is it's okay to have these big dreams. Like, what do you envision their beautiful, wonderful life being like? And then what are the small steps to get there? And none of us are going to have the perfect life, right? But let's get halfway there. Let's get 3/4 of the way there. And by knowing what your son or daughter's likes and interests are, what they're good at, what gives them a sense of like feeling like they've, have purpose. Noah loves to work, loves physical labor, right? So helping him through high school kind of and having the school explore what kinds of jobs did he do well at, where, he volunteered all over the place in his program. So for him, he loved school. We were so afraid of him losing that routine, that sense of community. And then, as we started to kind of look into what those services were for his adult life, our first couple years, I mean, it was awful. We couldn't find a program to take him because he had intense behaviors all over his records. So he kept getting turned down. 30, 40 applications we filled out. Denied. We got him into a one-year transitional program, and that really worked for him. So, kind of start doing that exploration. Some of you I know are already beyond this point, but if you're not, start doing that exploration now. Find out what is in your community. Get the school to help you start working on some of those volunteer opportunities, job skill-related types of things to find out Noah used to have an attention span, honestly, the school used to say, he has the attention span of a gnat, right? Like 2 seconds, he was all over. But when they gave him physical labor where he was pushing or raking, or he could do it for an hour, right? So get the school to help you figure out those things so that on graduation day, to 18, 21, whatever that is, you kind of have an idea of what you're looking for. But start doing that homework as well before. Start looking at what's available in your community. Look online for groups of young adults. In our area, we have groups for folks in self-direction, and you can kind of start to get a sense of what's going on in your local community. What programs are there for your loved one? I didn't follow this at all, so let me just see if I missed anything. I think I mostly covered that. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about some of our SAS family, and I see them here, the ones that we're going to talk about. I'll let Todd start with that, but the first two are Paul and Will, and they're identical twins. And the one thing I want to say before Todd talks a little bit about Paul is that their mom, Alice, and their dad, they've done a really good job at identifying their likes and dislikes and their talents. And you'll see from this that Paul and Will are very different, and as a result, the two of them just aren't being put in a corner in a day program somewhere, right? They're working right now. They're only 22, so they're developing this, but they're working on creating lives that are independent of one another and just really going to meet their needs and their interests. So you want to talk about Paul?
Sure. And we have neighbors that live a couple streets up from us, and they have twin girls that are not developmentally disabled, and they did everything together. They dressed them the same. They went to the same college. They roomed together.
Major.
They had the same major in college. They did all this stuff, and we looked at that from afar, and we thought, wow, that's something. I don't know. It just seems weird about that to us, right? I mean, it just seems strange, and so that's in a typical family. And think how easy it would have been to do that with Paul and Will, and to make those assumptions because of SAS. And so I applaud you guys for not doing that and treating them as individuals. And so Paul graduated this spring. He lives with his mom and stepdad in Tennessee, you can see, and he wants to be independent, and states this quite proudly. Right, Paul? Yes, giving me the thumbs up back there. He has his own suite in the basement, and they're trying to turn that into an apartment for him, and for that sense of independence. And you can see that he wants to work at a middle school, and he loves to laugh and hang out with his friends and super social. And that's also something that we see in some of our kids and not in others, right? We see that social component. Some of them we see more, autistic-like aversion to socialization, and some we see super social. Our son, like Paul, is super social, loves to be around people and interact with people. Paul's a greeter at his church and has gotten involved in that way. And like our youngest son, who doesn't have SAS, likes to help the older ladies out of their cars, right? He's a real charmer with the older ladies. And so, and he's the manager of the Lady Cougars softball team. And going to keep doing that for a while, Paul? All right.
All right. So Will, you wanted to do this?
So, yes. So I would like to have this, and we have a microphone in the middle of the room, and that's important to use that and not just talk from your seat, because the people that are joining us online, otherwise they won't be able to hear or know what you're saying. And so I wanted to, as we go through these, I wanted to stop and talk a little bit about what resonates with you, and what questions does this raise as we go through and talk about some of these folks. And so I'd love to hear any thoughts you guys have. What do you hear about Paul that prompts a question in your mind, or that resonates with you? Anybody? I'll give a moment of wait time to see if anybody has a thought. Okay, I have to ask you to come to the microphone. Sorry about that. Otherwise, our online viewers won't be able to hear.
I just think the big point I get out of it is everything that we do, they might not get the same thing out of it. So you were talking about church, and he helps the ladies. Well, for instance, my daughter right now is having an issue. She was going into the classes with the students, but she loves to say hi to everybody. So maybe we let her be the church greeter instead. She's not going to get the same thing out of it as I am. And just kind of remembering that as a parent, because I'm here without her today. She would have loved this, but right? And I struggle because I'm struggling that she's not here. She's not able to go play. And I feel like I'm taking that away from her. But at the end of the day, she's home with her dog that she loves, and she would be up here asking for her. So trying to kind of keep my emotion out of it and just making sure whatever she's doing, she might not be able to play softball, but maybe she could help them with getting their bats or water. Mm-hmm. Just utilizing the same things that you would with your typical children, but giving them a different job, I guess, in those aspects.
Thank you for sharing that. Who else?
All right, so we'll move on to Will. So Will is quite opposite of Paul in many ways. He lives with his dad and his stepmom in Tennessee. And for their family, this has really worked out well. I think both boys have really, you hear me talking about you, don't you, Will? Hi, Will. It's really worked out well for them. They've been able to kind of get their individualized needs met, I think, in a great way. Allison is very open to talking, so if you see her, feel free to ask questions. He prefers quiet, and he thrives on a routine, right? So he doesn't like a lot of change in his schedule. He doesn't like, kind of the social scene that his brother likes. They're looking for some kind of scheduled set day program for him that will give him that structure. He prefers small groups. He loves being around his family. They're both uncles. They have lots of nephews and nieces. And they call him the fierce protector of the family. He's looking out for those little kids all the time. So again, anything about Will, the differences, any questions about anything like that or thoughts on Will?
Oh, an expert's coming.
I'm Eric. I'm Paul and Will's dad, and really thank you all for profiling them because they're a little bit different in being identical twins with the same condition. So one of really the only thing I could probably offer, other than what y'all have encapsulated, is just the individuality. I mean, just because our kids deal with SAT-B doesn't mean that they don't have their individualities, and you just have to tailor their lives to what they want. And it's like we got twins, but we got half the extrovert and half the introvert kind of thing. So yeah, I'm talking about you. Just the ability to adapt and be flexible to their needs because, one would stay home all day, very routine, very methodical, and, the other would be out and about with everybody. So, just adapt to their individuality is about all I could say.
Great, thank you.
And I think the difference between Noah and our typical kids is that our typical kids have a voice and the ability to express to us their desires, their dreams, what they want, right? It's up to us with our SAS kids to figure that out and help them and just not make assumptions and do things for them, and like their dad said, like they're so individual, right? And they have such amazing personalities. So just like you're helping your other kids figure out life, we have to help them figure it out and what's going to work for them. I'm going to do Lindsay and then have you do Noah.
You go, and I'm going to walk around with the microphone because I think some people might have comments that won't come up to the microphone.
All right, so we'll move on to Lindsay, and our famous Lindsay is up here in the front. Can you wave, Lindsay? This is Lindsay. Are you able to go to that next slide with Lindsay? Okay.
It's up there.
All right. Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't seeing. So Lindsay lives in New York with her mom and dad. She attends a day program every day. Some of her activities include volunteering at Salvation Army, a women's shelter, and lots of social activities. It sounds like her day program has all kinds of, they plan parties and they do all kinds of fun things. She sent me tons of pictures, car washes, and lots of fun stuff. She's working on specific goals at her day program, focusing on communication, money skills, fine motor skills. So probably maybe getting a little bit more of that school model, that traditional model that I think she probably thrives on, right? Like it sounds to me like Lindsay likes that routine and that schedule. I know she's super social. She loves to help others with physical challenges. So when she goes to her day program and there's somebody there in a wheelchair or with special other different needs, she likes to help them. She has that desire to serve other people, which is really, really neat. And then she lives nearby her sister, and her mom was telling me, we had a phone conversation, her mom was saying that she spent the night at her sister's house, and I think that's in their mind is like a long-term option, and her sister has shared with her significant other that, she's probably gonna be with me someday. All of us are trying to figure it out, like what is that future looking like for our kids, and how, if they have other siblings, how involved will they be? I know one thing I hear all the time is I don't want my child with a disability to be a burden on their siblings. What we're finding in most cases is it's oftentimes there's one or two of those siblings that they want to be there. They want to help out. We're in a situation, and we'll get into it in a little bit, where because of his behavior challenges, we didn't want we wanted that living situation taken care of. So the group home model was kind of a better option. But in Lindsay's, this, this is working out great for them. This is a good thing for them. And every time I see Lindsay, she has a smile on her face. Is she always this happy? Not always. She's always happy. So any thoughts? Oh, sorry.
All right, who has a comment if I bring the microphone to you? Okay. That's okay. That's okay.
My question is, with Lindsay, I know that you had said that she has a very active during the day, but also at night or the evenings with rec. Can you explain that a little?
Faster.
You're welcome.
So on the weekends, they offer different rec programs, or what they call respite programs, where they'll go to like the movies or they'll go bowling. We're very lucky, we live in Buffalo, and the services that we get are really, really good as far as, I know now like that there's maybe waiting lists. We were very lucky when when Lindsay turned 21, that we were able to find a day hab that she loves, and then she'll go to a different program to get OTPT speech, and hang out with a different set of kids. And then usually during the weekdays, she doesn't go out at night because she likes to go to bed early, watch her shows, and go to sleep. But on the weekends, like she'll be gone from like 11 to 4, something like that. And then she also participates, there's a town program for people with disabilities that does cooking and stuff like that. So she likes to be going, right?
Anybody else?
Who else? Okay. Lindsay, I like to watch my shows and go to bed early too.
So I'm Kathy Woodward. This is my daughter, Amelia. I think she's probably real similar to Lindsay is what I'm thinking. And so this is cool. I was curious, when she does her activities with the rec program and whatnot, does she have a one-on-one with her? No. That's what we need, is the one-on-one. Or I guess maybe I'll talk to you later to find out, how did you feel comfortable to let her go to these activities without you, or your husband, or another one-on-one?
Did you want to comment on it?
So luckily, Lindsay's not a wanderer. Like she stays with the group. So I think the ratio is something probably like 1 adult to 6 participants, something like that. But I know some of the kids. I think in order to be at this program, you have to be able to, participate and not run. They don't have the staff to have a runner or something with them. So
We work with some folks that are able to take their own staff through self-directed services to some programs like that to get that ratio. Who else?
Julie.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see your hand there.
My thoughts are kind of scattered on this, but I was thinking, because my son's 14, and of course I'm thinking about what's going to happen after high school. So are a lot of the states have these programs that the kids can go into, and it's like state paid, or does it depend on the state? I mean, I know that's a really broad question, but I feel like a lot of different states have waiting lists and stuff for the kids to get into these programs and stuff. And then how do you know if where Paul and Will are with or I think maybe Noah was there, it's like a home they can stay in or whatever. How do you know if that's right for your child?
Okay. So I'll talk a little bit on the state programs, and then I'm going to let Todd talk about our decision for how Noah ended up in a group home. So every state has, it's going to be called a little bit different. And 2 years ago, I did a presentation. I think it's still on the website. I think it's still accessible. And the slides on there should still be pretty relevant. But every state has a developmental disability administration. The name might be a little different. It's a federal mandate that they have to have it. That agency is going to be the one that's going to kind of manage what's called a home and community-based service waiver. So all of our kids should qualify for this Medicaid-based waiver. And then in our state, we have 3 of them. There's 3 waivers. We have a family supports waiver that's for about 18 and under. And then we have a community supports waiver and a community pathways waiver. It's based on the community pathways waiver is if they need some kind of residential program. And then the community supports waiver is everybody else. We have probably one of the most robust. Maryland has an incredibly robust program. So not every state has the funding. It's a match program. Most of the services are matched. So your state's going to put in state Medicaid funds, and then it's going to be matched with federal funds. It does depend on the service within that waiver of the matching. So that gets complicated. But your high school, talk to your special educators, talk to your case managers. If you, like, your high school usually has a social worker or someone that can kind of help you navigate that process. They should be applying for Social Security at 18, and then Social Security and Medicaid are connected, right? So if you qualify for Social Security, then that's connected to your Medicaid. Some states you can't get services until 21. Some states have massive waiting lists. Our state, we're very fortunate. We have the governor's transitioning youth initiative, which meant anybody coming out of school at 21, automatically, if you qualified, if you met all the qualifications for this waiver, you didn't get put on the wait list. You got right in because they wanted kids to transition out of school into services. Not every state has that. I've known some families that have moved from one state to another because they might have another state nearby that has much better services. And really, if you're going to do that, do it before they're 21. Like, if that's a thought in your mind, like, I know our state has terrible services, think about that before they're 21, because oftentimes you have to be in the state before they're 21 to qualify for that. So that is, we did a talk about that a couple of years ago, and then 4 years ago, and then 2 years ago we did on housing, all the different housing kind of options. So if you go back and look at those, but I'd definitely be willing to connect to help you. Like, if you have a question about your state, I won't know the answer, but I know how to find the answer. And we were talking about that in our last session. We're going to start an adults group, just like they're having like regional groups. We're going to start an adults group. So we'll have an online, probably through Facebook, but we're going to try to start having regular meetings. I don't know how often that's going to be yet, but where we can have small conversations and discuss and ask these kinds of questions, and then reach, somebody maybe that lives in your state can say, oh, I've already done this, right? And we can start to connect people. I think will be really helpful. But yes, your son will qualify for one of these waivers. And I'll use Maryland as an example. So your child turns 21, you've applied, you've gotten Social Security, you've applied, I've contacted our Developmental Disability Administration, I've done the waiver application, I've gotten a case manager. In our state, they're now doing it backwards. You actually develop a person-centered plan, which is like your IEP, and then that gets approved, and then they send your waiver application in. So it's kind of backwards. It really should be the waiver application and then the plan, and then we were accepted. We're into services, right? So in our state, the team decides, the case manager, the family, based on their health needs, based on their behavioral needs, decides what level of services are needed. Then you decide, do I want to go traditional and use a group home, go to a day program, have agencies provide all the services, or do I want to what's called self-direct, which means they decide on a budget based on the needs, and then you would hire your own staff. You would help your son hire his own staff. You would develop their schedule, and so you're kind of responsible for the functioning of it, right? So pros and cons to both sides of how involved you want to be as a parent. But that is what Todd and I do. We work with the folks that choose to self-direct their services.
But our son is in traditional services because we think that's best for him.
Yeah. So, but I can try to get you that contact information. There's a website that shows the national, and it shows all the different state DDAs and kind of where to get started with this. Were you guys, when Lindsay was in school, was it something that was part of her exiting for them to help you?
We looked at different programs, depending on, her needs. It was apparent right away which one we liked the best. So yeah, they helped us.
And they helped you get connected with your waiver program or your funding
Yeah,
sources?
yeah.
Okay.
If the school isn't asking you yet, you start asking them, because that's part of their role. That's what they should be doing for
Yeah.
you. And one piece of advice I'd give to anybody is never let anybody talk you out of getting on a waiting list. We let that happen early in Noah's life. Somebody said, oh yeah, this isn't for him or whatever, and we regretted not getting on that waiting list. You can always say no when your turn comes up. You can always say no.
Or-
But you can't jump up higher on the waiting list when you need the service.
Right.
So get on the waiting list for housing vouchers, for the DDA kind of services. Every waiting list you think might possibly apply to you, get your name on it, right? Because when they come up, you can always say, yeah, that's not for us right now. And then different waiting lists have different rules about. Some of them keep you up there at the top, and when you do need it, it's ready for you. Some of them move you all the way to the bottom, but don't worry about that now. Get on the list.
Yeah, we have a lot of folks that we support that have Section 8 vouchers. We have a couple other different some cities have their own vouchers. We have a lot of folks that live in their own apartments that we support with around-the-clock care.
That opens up a whole world of opportunities when you can figure out the housing piece,
Yeah.
right? And some of those waiting lists are long.
Do you want to go ahead and talk about how Noah ended up in a group home?
Sure. So
Well, his slide, let me switch. His slide is next. So
Is he
it's
next?
going to have Todd do Noah, and as part of that, you can talk about
okay.
how he ended up.
So we told you Noah lives in a group home with one of the people there is his best friend, right, Noah? Right? Is Taylor your best friend, buddy?
Taylor's on the left, in the top left picture with the pajamas on.
Yes. And this really broke Stephanie's heart when Noah had to move to a group home. But the behaviors became aggressive, and it turns out that we and our house seemed to be his triggers. And so it became obvious to me probably a couple years before it became obvious to Stephanie that our situation of Noah living with us was not a long-term solution. And so I was trying to walk that fine line there of knowing
I
this.
threatened to move out at one
Yeah,
point.
she's
That's
like,
where we got.
I'm taking him. I'll go somewhere else with him. I said, okay, let's relax
It's my
here.
baby. I'm protecting him. Nobody will care for him the way I will. I mean, it was.
And somebody advised us. I worked in education setting, and somebody at our state Department of Education advised us one point. I said, how do we get this taken care of? Because at one point we knew something had to change, but we weren't at the right place on the waiting list, right? We couldn't get anybody to agree that we needed these services. And she said, here's what you have to do. When you get some of these behaviors, you have to, as much as it kills you as a parent, you got to call the police, right? And you have to have the police come. You have to have them write down. We got called to this house because of behaviors, and we did that a couple times. And then one time,
His behaviors really were at that level.
they were severe.
Physically hurting us.
Right. And then at one point we had him, as part of that, we had him transported to the hospital. And we, of course, went right with him and all that kind of stuff and stayed with him and all that kind of stuff. But then we had to, and this killed us as parents also, we couldn't get people to agree on services, right? Some of these agencies, everybody said, we're the agency of last resort.
Noah had just turned 18, so Child Services said he doesn't belong to us. Developmental Disability said we don't really start till they're 21. The school system said he doesn't exhibit behaviors at school. So nobody would claim him. Nobody would help us.
Right, so they all said, yeah, we're the last resort. And we said, well, you can't all be the last resort. Somebody's got to be the first resort, right? And so what this person suggested to me was that we had him transported to the hospital. And like I said, we were there with him around the clock. But then we said, it's not safe. He can't come home. Okay, and so we just took away that option of them discharging and saying it's not our responsibility anymore. We just said that's not safe, right? And he can't come home. And so that then forced a crisis that these agencies had to come together and figure out. And so that's what worked in our situation. And like I say, that really was breaking her heart or whatever. But we worked through it. and we got him into a group home. And it turned out, it was amazing to me how that improved everybody's life that was involved. Noah suddenly had a better life. Our other kids suddenly had a better life. We had a better life. Our house, we didn't learn until Noah moved out how many things that we had changed in our house and our lives to accommodate that just, it wasn't like every one of them we said, man, this is a big sacrifice. Congratulations to us for changing this. We just did it because that's how life worked.
We have a keypad on every single bedroom door in our house. We have extra lock systems on every exterior door of our home. You couldn't leave anything on the counter. You couldn't have any knives where they were visible. We had nothing hanging on our walls. Furniture had to be movable. So anything that was, a large cabinet could come down at any time. So we had really, and our other kids, they all had lockers in their bedrooms that could be locked for them to put their personal info, special stuff in, because he was completely destructive. And if he knew it was special to you, he would target it. So we didn't even realize just how much we had adapted. It was shocking.
If we could have taken a 10,000-foot view, we would have seen all that, of course, but we were right in it, and so we couldn't see any of it. But then when he changed his situation, like I say, it was amazing to me how everybody's life improved. And let's see.
Talk about his life now.
Go ahead.
Okay, so he's in this group home. Noah lives just 5-10 miles north of the DC line. He's in a town called Rockville, Maryland. Our plan was for him to live in our home, and my parents lived next door, and I eventually wanted to buy their house and turn our home into a group home. So we had made some modifications to our house and even made it wheelchair accessible, and we had done some things like with this long-term idea of our home's gonna be a group home. Noah made it very clear to us, and Julie, you were asking, how do you know? We started to see our home was his trigger. He was happier other places. I even had my parents both passed much earlier than we expected, and I had the opportunity, right, to possibly do this model, and I thought, oh my gosh, he hates it here. He does not like being in the country. We're in the middle of 6 acres. He loves being in an urban area. He has made that very clear. So at that point, it was like, no, this plan was great 10 years ago in my mind. This is not what he needed. I would highly recommend when you're dreaming and thinking about this, have multiple options. Don't pigeonhole yourself into one. This is how it's going to be, because that was really hard for me to kind of let that dream go. But he's in the heart of Rockville now. He has what's called community development services. So his services are run through an agency, but we didn't want him. He does not do well being in the same building every day, and we wanted him out and about. And what we see in Maryland sometimes is some of our day programs, they don't go anywhere. They just stay in a building all day long. And his personality would not like that. He's still, the attention span of a gnat, so he needs constant visuals, and he loves to watch. You'll see him this week just watching everybody. He's a people watcher. So he has a one-to-one. She meets him at his house every day at 9 o'clock. He's already dressed for the day, have breakfast. She gets him, and he's on a pretty busy schedule, but it changes with the seasons, really. So right now, like on Tuesdays, the great thing about him having the one-to-one is I can sign him up for classes and things throughout the week, and they'll work that into his schedule. Of course, I have to pay for them, so he goes to a music class every Tuesday, an adapted music class that he loves. He's been doing it for about a year and a half, 2 years now. He goes to 2 fitness classes a week that his staff take him to. So we were able to sign him up for these things, and they take him, which is fantastic. Then after his music class, he goes out to lunch with friends. They meet at the food court in the mall, and then he goes and works at a farm in the afternoon. So the one picture of him raking there, that's him at the farm. Then on Wednesdays, he goes to a horse rescue, and he gathers all the buckets, and his job every Wednesday is to wash out and scrub out all the buckets and hose them down. Fridays there's like social fun day, so they do the movies or bowling or miniature golf, something like that. So he's really busy. I think probably the thing he likes the least is the one-to-one tends to isolate him from the group sometimes. So that's what we're working on right now. He would prefer to ride in the van with the whole group of people. but he needs the one-to-one because he's constantly, Noah's a picker, so he's constantly tearing at his skin. He recently started biting, and he's chewing on inappropriate. He was just diagnosed with pica. So he really needs the one-to-one, and he's doing it more when he's in the car with her. So we're thinking, well, put him in the group van, put the one-to-one next to him, and we might see a decrease, and he'll be happy because he loves that communal we always called him our shepherd. As a family of 6, he would always like run to the front of the group and try to stop us, and then run to the back, and he wanted everyone to move like an amoeba, right? So we tried to model his day based on those. I told you earlier, we found out through school he likes physical activity, heavy things. I think they give him that sensory input that he needs. So almost all of his jobs relate to that. We noticed, which I think a lot of SAS kids, he loves to put things in bags. I think last time we were noticing that like all of our kids want to shove stuff in bags. So I was laughing. I was asking him what he's doing at the food bank, and they said handing stuff out. And I said, do they ever make bags to give out? And they said yes. And I said, can you get him doing that? Let him take all the items from the food bank and put them in the bags to hand out. So that's our next step with him, is getting him doing that. I keep waiting for my slides to go.
All right. What thoughts or questions does anybody have?
So, 2 parts to that. You were able to get him in the group home at 18. For us that are not quite there yet, but I feel like I'm literally living your life to a T. I'm from Maryland too, by the way. I mean, you talked to my mom earlier. The actions, everything is what I'm just getting ready to get into, and she's 13. I guess you'll help me later, but how do you get this help before they're 18 without having to take them to the ER, or do you have to do that then as well?
Start documenting everything. The more documentation, we had a roundtable with the adults earlier, and we talked about, all of the folks that are going to come in and want to help you are going to start asking you questions. There's going to be, applications to fill out. We want to brag about our kids and all the things they're learning and all their great qualities, but when it comes to filling out any kind of assessment, it is their worst day, right? You put down there every single struggle they have, all of the behaviors, all of the health issues, like that picture. We don't always want that picture to be negative, but we have to put all of those things on there. And Terry mentioned in our conversation over there that when she was working as an advocate with families, that a lot of times they kind of fight the diagnosis. And I know when Noah was little, they were trying to label him as autistic, and I didn't want that because I didn't want a teacher to read that and think he isn't social. Because Noah loves to engage. He's shy, but he loves to engage, and he's not autistic in that sense. He's autistic in the OCD things, but he's not autistic in his social skills.
But having those papers say autism was what got us many of the services we have.
Yeah, so don't fight those diagnoses. Embrace everything, right? Because that's going to help you with services. It is harder to get, like for us, it was very hard to get the group home setting. It worked out beautifully. Noah was going to a private special ed school in Rockville. There were only 3 group home options. Once we fought the fight and got the approval, there were 3 options, and one of them was in Rockville. So we were able to keep his school the same and had all his teachers who loved him texting and calling me every day going, I don't think Noah got a shower last night. I don't like the way they're packing his lunch. I had eyes on him every day and was able to go in and fix those problems in the group home because I was getting reports every day from people that had known him for years. So that worked out really well for us. It is hard to get that setting. I know there's some other people in our group that have their kids as youth in group homes. So it is possible, but you do have to document. If you have any kind of case manager, I know in the state of Maryland, we do have the family supports waiver. So if you're not there yet, I will help you with that. But that's a possibility. There's a wait list on that, but I would get on the list. Get on the list. And just start. Yeah, we used to say with Noah that it was like flipping a switch. He could be happy and calm, and then all of a sudden he would just flip, and next thing I knew, I was on the floor and he was on top of me. Right. Like there was just and we have not seen, thank God, we have not seen that we see frustrations, And we have PRN meds with us this week because I think his last major outburst was at the SATB2 conference 2 years ago.
But we mostly only see it with us. We're the triggers, right?
Yeah. Certain places and things do trigger him, and we kind of learn to avoid those. But yeah, it's definitely a connection with our kids. So
Hi, this is Angelina here. Hi, say hi. Actually, I'll ask the question in private. Yeah.
okay, sure.
You were going to ask for that. Another best day, worst day thing that we talk about, and I've had conversations with people, is some schools are willing to lower the standards a little bit and get our kids a diploma for high school. That's not always a good thing. On its surface, you might think that's a great thing, and you don't want to hold them back from what they can. If they're capable of getting a high school diploma, great. If they aren't quite, and the school's going to kind of make it happen for you, you might want to consider whether or not that may impact your ability to get services later.
Depending on some states, that could potentially limit the level of service they could get. Some states look at that and say you have a diploma, that means you're employable, and that can be a deterrent. Not every state is like that. It really depends on kind of how progressive your state is.
I just want you to think through that issue. That was my point. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. We have an online question. They said that they're not at the behavioral stage at this time, but they're curious to know if anyone has tried any medication for behaviors.
We can talk about our story. I don't love medication, so I'm trying to be more on the natural. So I kind of fought that, I think, to Noah's demise. So we ended up around that time in his late teen years, started him on, we tried risperidone. He was allergic, we didn't do that, so we had to go off that. He had a pretty bad reaction. And then we went to olanzapine. He was on that for many, many years. Then we started to notice in the group home, he's not having behaviors. And we have him on this really, intense medication. And they're telling us, he doesn't have any behaviors. So we started to wean him and increase Zoloft to try to help with anxiety, which I know how, but we've upped it. So now he's on Zoloft, he's off the olanzapine, and we have olanzapine PRN that dissolves under the meds, under the tongue. I don't know if anybody else feel comfortable sharing that.
Anybody else want to comment on that or anything else in our last minute or two here?
So during COVID, when she couldn't do anything, she likes to be go, 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 we started noticing behaviors, mostly directed at mom. So we got a prescription for propanol. Propanol is a blood pressure med, so that would just calm her enough for us to redirect it, whatever was going to happen. And she's also on sertraline. Is that Zoloft?
Yes, certainly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm sorry. She's on Estilopram now.
Okay.
Yeah. Kind of the same family. And birth control.
Anybody else on that topic or anything else? We have about 3 minutes left.
My son's only 17, but I'm like you, no one else can take care of him, and I know I have a road to plan. But what is your life now with Noah, visiting him coming over? I didn't know if you said how far apart you are, but those days and times that you have with him.
So we're trying
to I'll start on this one.
Okay.
So we have the same debate that we've had many times. Mom's heart, right, wants him with us as much as possible. And Noah he always wants to come and see us, always. He always wants to come see us. He always likes it when we have siblings and lots of people in the house, but he doesn't want to stay long, right? So mom wants him to come and stay a week. Noah wants to come, and after about a day or a day and a half, right, he's shown us pictures of his house and his housemates or whatever, and starting to move furniture and things like that, and he's ready to go back. So we continue to have that same kind of struggle about what's the right amount of time. We see him usually two times a week, I'd say, on average.
I'd say Noah's dream would be to spend 2 days at our house, 2 days at his group home, 2 days, he would just love to bounce back and forth probably. What we noticed too is he wants to just go in the house and check things out. Is the furniture where I left it? Are the cars parked? I don't know, but we move cars.
Cars have a personality for Noah.
Yeah, cars are a real thing in his life, and we move them, and sometimes they're in a line. During COVID, we only had about a 2-month, maybe 8-week period. We couldn't see him. We were able to go and at least take him for walks and stay outside. But there was about a 8-week period. We had all of our kids home from college and their adult lives in our house except Noah. And our daughter-in-law was there. And so we would FaceTime him every day, and his brothers would take the camera outside, and Noah would point, I want this car here. We have a giant driveway. I want this car here. And we had all these and strange conglomerations of our cars, right? And all of our kids are super involved in his life. Our daughter last year, our youngest son had a baseball tournament in Florida, and our daughter Hannah picked Noah up from his group home. We were in Florida for like 10 days, and I wanted Noah to come. And Todd said, he will kill us in 10 days. We'll all be like ready to just kill each other. So Hannah, halfway through, like on the Wednesday, picked him up at his house, went to Reagan National, flew to Orlando, met us, stayed through, and we all flew back on Saturday night. And it was
perfect.
Phenomenal. It was absolutely perfect. And I was so proud of her, because the one time we were coming home from one of these conferences, we were at the Dallas airport and security had to be called because if he was flipping things over in a store. So you never know with him. And the fact that she was just so willing to do that was wonderful. Our other son just moved back in our area and has a baby now. And their plan is when they kind of get their bearings with a baby is to go and take him out once a week and take him for a walk with the baby. And so, I mean, I see it I see it coming, but we're still trying to figure out that routine. I feel like when I take him midweek, I disrupt his schedule. So now we're trying weekends. So I pick him up a lot on Saturdays and take him back on Sunday nights. So, we're still trying to figure it out, but we're super involved. We can pop into his house anytime. There's no rules on having to notify them that we're coming. We just show up. And I communicate really well with the other family members, so three of the four of us, the moms, communicate on almost a weekly basis. And I'm the activity planner, so when I know they have a downtime, like they have a weekend that they don't have anything, I'll look for things and buy tickets, and the staff love to take them. The staff don't want to sit at the house either, right? So the staff want to take them out in the community, which is fantastic.
We talk about moving cars and things like that. Like a behaviorist would tell us we're out of our mind for doing that. And we probably were. Like when he started lining things up when he was a young teenager, we thought it was cute. It's not as cute when it's the couch and the big hutch in the corner and whatever. But so we tried to do our best with a mix of that. Anyway, we're at 12 o'clock now. I think it's lunchtime. And thank you guys so much for your participation.